Hi everybody, it's Franny, and while we're still waiting on parts for the Ferrari, I've had a lot of requests over the years to do a video on all of my tools. What I have laid out here are my absolute favorite tools, so I wanted to go through all of them and show you why they're so special. The first thing I want to start off with is not technically a tool, it's actually my tool chest. I love this thing. Before I had this, I had tools strewn all over the place, they were hard to find, it was just kind of a mess, and this thing's great. Allows you to organize all of your tools the way you want to organize them, in whatever order makes sense to you. And you've got a lot of different drawers here. Some of the drawers, as they go down, they get a little bit deeper, so you can put bigger things in them, which is great. This particular tool chest is actually very strong. A lot of this stuff is really heavy, and these drawers have been working great. It's just a great way to organize everything. So this, a tool chest, is like one of my most absolute favorite things. Let's start over on this side. Some of my tools are kind of specialized, and others of them are just sort of very simple, basic tools, but I use them a lot. But let's start with safety. So in the cars, we generally carry these halotron fire extinguishers. These things are great. They're not chemical extinguishers, so if you did have to spray them on your engine, they're not going to destroy the engine in the process. So these things are really nice, but I also carry one of these in the cars as well, and this is an element fire extinguisher. It really just looks more like a flare than anything else, actually. And the way this thing works is you pull this guy off, you pull the top off of it, and you spark it, and then it is a lot like a flare, but it runs for up to 5 times the normal discharge rate of a very big fire extinguisher, and it weighs almost nothing. And you can put a couple of these in your car and they'll pretty much last forever because they're not pressurized or anything. I really like these, and they're supposedly good for pretty much everything. These things are pretty cool. I hope I never ever have to use one, but I feel very confident having one. Moving on with safety is always my safety glasses. You see me wear these things all the time, and anytime I'm under the car, I think anything can splash up or whatever, boy, these things are super important. My dad told me a story one time about safety glasses. He was an airline pilot and flew for United Airlines for many, many years, and he had a friend, a fellow pilot, who came home from an event at one time at night, and he thought, oh, I'm gonna just go out into the garage really quick like a bunny, and he turned on a power tool and it shot something up, and he said, my father's name was Pat, and he said, you know, Pat, I knew better, and I could feel it as it went in my eye and was circling around. Well, he lost his vision in that one eye and was unable to fly after that. So, I always wear my safety glasses, very, very important. So we all know what this is, and there's always that axiom about getting a bigger hammer. I don't like to use metal hammers if at all possible, and I really like this one because it's rubber on one side, plastic on the other. I think you can even unscrew these things and replace them if you wanted to, but this is not an expensive hammer at all, but I use it quite a bit. You can see it's all kind of messed up. These things are great, and before you go looking for a metal hammer to bash away on a bolt or hit the thread side of a bolt, use one of these instead and see if you can get it off, because there's almost no chance you're going to damage the threads hitting it with one of these. These things are great. Now this may seem kind of silly, but I love these magnetic trays. These things are great. You can stick them to something magnetic and then actually put your bolts in, and they'll actually stick when they're vertical. So check this out. We can stick our bolts in there and they'll even stay. And that's pretty amazing. I love these things. And more importantly is that if you have several of them, you can, and you're taking a complicated thing apart, you can put all the bits from each part of the assembly in a separate tray. And then when you go to put it all back together, you just look to see if you've got any parts left over, and you know you're done. Because if you've got parts left over, then you're not done. So I love these trays. They come in different sizes. They're not expensive at all. And so I would suggest stock up on a bunch of these. And speaking of magnets, these things will save your buns more times than you can count. They're just telescoping little magnets that you can use to grab onto washers or nuts or anything that you've lost inside the car. Sometimes when you're taking off, say on a vertical stud, and you take off the nut, but there's still a washer there, and you're fiddling around with it, trying to get it off, something like this just goes tink, grabs hold of it, gets it right off, and then you don't have to worry about that washer falling into somewhere it really shouldn't be, like, I don't know, maybe into the engine. These things are amazing. And then if you do lose something, say something does sort of fall off and falls behind there, you can search around and you'll hear this click, and then you know you've got it and you can pull it right out. These things are amazing. They're not expensive, and I've got two of them, a bigger one and a smaller one for really tight places. These are awesome. Let's talk about light a little bit. I like these lights. They're very general, but they really show quite a bit of light here, and you can kind of turn them down. I like this. It's also magnetic on this side, so it'll stick to things like this, and you can kind of stick it underneath the car and get the light almost where you need it. But you can't quite get the light exactly where you need it. Then one of these headlights is great. They're super duper bright. So look at this. Yeah, that's pretty bright. And you've got a couple different settings here, and all of them together. And this particular one is really nice because it's rechargeable as well. So these things last quite a while. Boy, this thing will last like 3 or 4 hours being on continuously. And then you can charge it back up and it's ready for the next day. Moving on to some more generic tools. These are nut drivers and they're not expensive. I use them all the time. The nice thing about them is you don't have to get out a ratchet, an extender, and a socket. Since it's all together, it's all ready to go. I use them all the time, so much so that I've actually worn off the 10mm. Plastic pry bars. There are so many times, especially working in the interior, where you've got to get something off, but you don't want to mar it. And they make these sets with have several of these in a set. They're not expensive at all. They're actually pretty strong, and you can actually put quite a bit of force on them. They don't really break, and you can pop things off with them without marring surfaces. How about a little ratchety wrench? These things are great. They're teeny though. See how short they are? This is a 12mm. Just so happens this one fits the nuts that hold the carburetor on the 356, and it's just the right size. And you can get in there in these teeny little areas with these short little guys. And I have a full set of them. And if you can get this over the nut or the bolt, you know, you can be in a really tight area and still get some movement on them. I love these things. These are awesome. Now you may wonder what this thing is. It's kind of a weird looking contraption, but if you watch some of my other videos, you've seen me use this. This is a seal puller. Really what you do is you try to get this little lip here underneath the back side of the seal. Even if the shaft is coming out, you can still work it in there, and you can position this little guy wherever you need it, lock it down, and you can get quite a bit of leverage to pull that seal right out. These things work really well. They don't look like they would, and you kind of think, well, and you can mess with this a bit, and you're like, I don't quite have it right. But if you fuss with it for a few minutes, you'd be surprised. You can pull the seal out, and you won't damage the shaft. That's huge. So these things are worth their weight in gold when you have to take a seal out. Now, this is a funny looking little tool, and if you remember from the 3.2 Carrera where I set the valves, you're like, oh, that's right. That was that little tool that you used. That's right. See, these two pins are exactly the right angle to account for the exact spacing that we need on the valve clearance. And you can make one up for any car, whatever car you've got, a Volkswagen Beetle or a 356 or the 3.2 Carreras or whatever, but you can push this thing in, you line up one pin with something off in the distance and you just sort of rotate it, boom, then lock it right back down, and it guarantees the exact spacing that you need. These things are kind of fun. It's just an old crummy screwdriver that I cut the top off of just so it was a lot shorter, and literally a little bit of JB Weld and my, you know, a little bit of wire here. These things work great. So some of my tools are actually tools I've built specifically for jobs, and this is one of them. Before we go too much further, this guy. This is the star of the show for me. It's just my shop camera. It's an old Canon camera. The lens is a little bit messed up on it, but it does really, really well. I can take all sorts of pictures with this thing, and it has a really good macro mode, which I really like. And then I take the pictures, I dump them to my laptop, and then when I'm reassembling, it's super easy to get everything all back together because I've got very detailed photos. And you can take photos of which way did the bolt go in? What was its washer situation? What did its nut look like? Was it a captured nut? Was it this type of nut? Was it that? I use this pretty much on every job. So a good shop camera is essential. All All right, moving on real quick. This is just a long wrench. It's a 22 millimeter, but it's actually really, really long. I have a full set of these, and they're very handy for suspension work. So you can get up there on that bolt, and you've got quite a bit of leverage, because maybe you can't get your socket up in there because it's just too occluded or whatever. This works great for that. And you get it up there, and you've already got all this leverage. As we're going through all these tools, think about some of the tools that you use that you can't live without, and comment that down below. I'd love to hear about all of your tools that you're like, oh, I cannot live without. This has saved me time after time, because I'm kind of into interesting tools that work really well. So yeah, that'd be great. Comment that down below. That brings me to this guy. This is my Expandy Collapsy Ratchet. I love this thing. It's big enough to really double as a breaker bar. It's amazingly strong, and of course, it's a ratchet. So when I have to take wheels off a car, this is what I use. And these are torqued to about 90 foot-pounds, so this thing pulls those guys off just fine. The cool thing is that if you can get in there and kind of break a nut loose, then you can collapse it up a bit, and you've got a lot more room to work. Just love these things. Now they come in a couple of different flavors and different sizes, so I have a smaller one here as well that's actually got dual heads on it, so 3/8 and a 1/4 inch, and this is a 1/2 inch, I believe. These things are amazing. And speaking of wrenches, you really need a torque wrench for almost all the work you're going to be doing, and this Tekton is a really good torque wrench. They're not particularly expensive, they click nice and loudly, and I have 3 of them in 3 different sizes, and this one goes up to 150 foot-pounds, which is plenty. I mean, that's quite a bit. The smaller one I've got here, the little bitty one, is actually in inch-pounds. So that's really nice. You can get really, really small torques with this thing, and in some places you absolutely need this. So it's really great. Both of them also are graduated in Newton meters as well. A full set of good torque wrenches is essential. And my last ratchet looks like just sort of a standard ratchet. You know, nothing really special, except that, check this out, you can turn the handle on it. Isn't that interesting? So if you're up in a really tight place and you've got this into, you know, with a socket up on a nut or a bolt or something like that, and going back and forth, and you're just going, you know, like that, it's gonna take forever. Once you get it loose, you can go ahead and twist this guy and pull it right off. It works really well. Of course, it's reversible, and there's a little pin in here to hold the socket on so it stays put. I really like this guy. I've been using it more and more. I also have a couple of these guys. These are called torque extenders. One of them is 19 millimeters and the other one is 15. Just so happens that the 15 fits the drain plug on the 3.2 Carrera, and because of the kind of where it is, it's very difficult to get a socket over that drain plug, yet it does need to be torqued. So what you do is grab your torque wrench and throw this guy on, and then we want to be sure that we rotate it so that it's at 90 degrees to our ratchet, or as close as possible to 90 degrees. There we go. And that means that at this configuration, whatever you got your torque wrench set to will be the torque delivered at this point. If you run it like this, where it's straight out, then you're going to have to do some calculations to lower your torque wrench to get the correct torque. But the easy thing to do is just to put it at 90 degrees. And I also have this guy. And you're like, well, great, what is that? Well, this is also a torque adapter, but it takes your wrench. So you put your wrench in here like this, and you can clamp down on these guys. All right. And then on the back, we can attach our torque wrench, spin off to 90 degrees like this. As strange as this looks, we can now torque with this setup, and we can use any of the wrenches that we've got that will fit that nut or bolt or whatever. These things are great for suspension, because a lot of times suspension bolts, 1 or 2 of them will be completely accessible, but then there will be a fair number of them that won't be. You can't get a socket on it. So how do you torque them? Well, you torque them with one of these things. Works pretty well. And my last ratchet here is just my little itty bitty 1/4 inch. I like it because it has a rotating head on it, so you can kind of use it as a nut driver. Works pretty well. I use this thing quite a bit, but it's also super short and super stubby. So this is great for getting into really tight places with a small socket on the end of it, and you need to kind of get in there and tighten that thing down. There's almost no room. This thing works great for that, and it's just been very durable, not a very expensive piece. Totally awesome. My other half over here are a bit more specialized, starting with a good set of ring pliers. So I had kind of a crummy set where you could actually, replace the ends on it and had a bunch of different attachments and stuff to it, but it just wasn't very strong. And some of those ring clips are really serious, and trying to get them off with a kind of a crummy pair, they break or they twist or they bend, it'll just frustrate you. These things are great. I just got a full set of them. They weren't expensive, and I've used them actually quite a bit. And really quick, this is nothing more than a long Allen socket guy. These things are great. I used this on the 3.2 Carrera, in fact, because it required really, really long ones to get the exhaust manifolds on and off. But I found that I use these things all over the place. The bigger ones, like maybe this one, these are great for getting CV bolts off. So I've actually used these a lot. So if you can go for it, a set of really long Allens is very helpful. Now, no, this isn't a piece of medical equipment, although it kind of looks like it. It's a little scary looking, this thing. It's actually used to get ball links off. And ball links can be a real bear. Sometimes they just hit them once with a hammer and boom, they pop right off. And then the other side you could spend 4 hours on. That's ball links. That's the way they go. This is an actual press that will push these things off, and it does a great job. And it's adjustable. They've got 2 different spots in there where you can put the pivot arm, so that's really nice. And this thing is super duper strong and will literally just pop them off in seconds. This is pretty specialized. It's really a low pressure gauge is what it is. So up to like 10 PSI, but it also does vacuum as well. So this is really handy for a bunch of things. If you've got an older car with a carbureted system on them, those fuel pressures are very low, lower than 4 PSI, usually lower than 3 PSI. This is a nice gauge because it's got so much movement on it just for 10 PSI. You can really dial in your pressure really, really well with this. And for vacuum. So say you've got a car and you think, I'm thinking I kind of got a vacuum leak somewhere. You can hook this thing up to your vacuum system and see if you've got a full solid vacuum or not. Quite durable, comes with a bunch of hoses and connections, little T's and stuff. Thing's pretty cool. Now this is kind of funny looking, and if you don't have a Volkswagen Beetle or a Porsche 356, you probably have no clue what this thing is. It's a torque multiplier is what it is. So this guy you can attach to your drum in the back, and this will go over the bolt on the hub like this, and you can put a socket on this side, and you can turn this guy and it will give you a 9-to-1 multiplication on that. They're also really good for getting the gland nut off the flywheel, and they call it a gland nut, it's actually a bolt, but the big bolt that's holding on the flywheel, this guy you can pop over it, and this will run actually on the flywheel, on the starter ring around the flywheel, and it will just turn it either way. Yeah, you can get it off with a big impact hammer, but if you want to put it on correctly to the correct torque, these things work really, really well, but very specialized to Volkswagen Beetle or 356. Now let's move to the complete opposite end of the spectrum. This is, believe it or not, an oscilloscope. This is a little Pico 2000 series oscilloscope that you plug into your laptop, and it's got all sorts of accessories like a current clamp, and we've got these other clamps that you can use for spark plug wires as well. And there's a bunch of different clamps and things you can hook up to these things. And they will tell you so much. And so the Pico has a really good set of software that runs on the laptop. And you can log and monitor what's going on in your engine. So an oscilloscope, really all it does is measure voltage. But it measures voltage over time. And it's that over time bit that's great. I use the little Picoscope quite a bit on the Porsche 3.2 Carrera. You can really go down a rabbit hole with these things. You can test so many things. You can test your ignition system. You can clamp onto your starter cable, and you can actually perform sort of this virtual compression test. Really an interesting tool, and can tell you a huge amount about how your engine is running, how the combustion chamber is going. Do you have a bad plug? Do you have bad wires? Highly recommend getting one of these, but I will warn you, it is a bit of a rabbit hole going down into it, but super, super for fun. This is a leak down tester. So you're going to need your compressor for this as well. But what you do is you take one line from the compressor, set it to, I don't know, about 80 psi or so. Make sure that your cylinder you want to test is at top dead center, and you hook the line into the spark plug hole. Then when you put the pressure into this, you can rotate this, pull the pressure up on your cylinder, and read the difference between the two gauges. One of the gauges is going to run the actual pressure that's coming out of your compressor, and the other one's going to look at the pressure that's inside the cylinder. If you have a leak, then this pressure will be less, and that's how you'll know if you've got an issue with your cylinder. But the reason I really like leak down tests is because they'll tell you where your problem is. A compression test doesn't tell you where your problem is, it just tells you what the compression was in the cylinder. It's a useful test, but it doesn't tell you as much as this does, because if you hear hissing coming out of your exhaust pipe, then it's probably your exhaust valve that's leaking. What about in your intake? Well, if you hear it coming out of the carburetors or the fuel injection system, you hear this little hissing in there, your intake valve's not so happy. What if your rings are bad? Well, your crankcase breather or whatever you've got on your car that lets the gas out of the actual crankcase, you'll be able to hear it there as well. And so you can tell that your rings aren't so great. And you want to run through all of your cylinders, and they should be within a few percentage of each other, and that tells you you've got at least a consistent engine at that point. But I love the leak down test. Very easy to perform, super easy to work with, and will tell you a huge amount of information. Love this guy. And the last thing I want to talk about is a good multimeter. This is actually an automotive multimeter, which is kind of cool because it has a few extra functions. So it will actually give you dwell and RPM, which can be very, very handy on the car. If you need to really look at that RPM on the car, is it really fluctuating? What's it doing? This will actually read out and tell you just exactly what your RPM is. And in addition, it's just a regular multimeter, does voltage and does current as well. So you can use it for all sorts of diagnostic work on your car. If you've got a parasitic leak somewhere, this is what you're going to use to find those sorts of things. This thing is really handy. A very old school version of that is something like this, and I've had a bunch of people write in and say they can't find these anymore. I got this off Amazon years ago, but I do like analog meters because they're a little bit easier to read sometimes, and the digital meters kind of sample at a certain rate and they kind of jump around a little bit. So the analog meter is a little easier because you can just read the needle. This one does volts, dwell, and RPM. Great for an older car. So if you've got a Volkswagen Beetle or a 356, something with a kind of older school ignition system, this is great. This is how you would set your points. And this will also give you a readout on your RPMs as well. So if you need to set the base idle on your car from the carburetor or whatever, this can also help you with that. So I like the old school meters if you can find them, and the digital meters if you can't. I went through that entire list and forgot one of my biggest signature accessories, the blue gloves. I use these all the time, and I know they rip. I know they are hard to get on when it's hot and sweaty. I know they're not perfect, but boy is it nice to be able to rip one of these things off and not have completely grimy hands. I say this a lot in the videos. Also, those chemicals are not so great to get on your hands either, and if you're cleaning parts for hours at a time, it does weep into your system. So gloves are awesome. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below and I'll get right to them. Like I said, let me know what you've got in tools in your garage that you just can't live without, that are just absolutely amazing for you. All right, well, thank you so much for watching. And as always, a very special thank you to our Patreon supporters. Until next time, safe travels. Bye.